I remember that fateful night as if it were a dream, a single moment that changed everything. In the quiet hum of an upscale downtown bar in New York City, I found myself face to face with Leonard, a retired judge whose dignified presence masked a turbulent past. His eyes held both wisdom and regret, and in that charged moment, our forbidden connection ignited. Little did I know that this secret meeting would soon unravel a truth that I had buried deep inside me, a truth that tied me to a past I never imagined. My name is Cindy, and I work as a law intern in one of the most respected firms in the USA. I grew up with a passion for justice, but my own story was more complicated than most. I had been drawn to the legal world not only by my ambition but also by a need to understand the deep wounds left in my family's history. You see, my father, Stanley, had been wrongfully convicted of a crime he did not commit. 4 years, I lived with the silent agony of his fate, a painful secret that I carried like a heavy stone in my heart. I had heard whispers about Leonard's storied career in court. He was a man who had spent decades dispensing wisdom and justice from his bench. But behind that legacy lay choices that had cost an innocent man his freedom, my father. I never imagined that the man responsible for that terrible mistake could be the same person who, in the twilight of his life, would sweep me into a world of passion and danger. That night, after a long day of shadowing attorneys and poring over case files, I sought refuge in a dimly lit bar off a quiet street. It was there, amidst the soft jazz playing in the background, that I first saw him. Leonard was sitting alone, nursing a glass of aged whiskey, his silver hair catching the light in a way that made him look both regal and fragile. His eyes met mine for a brief second, a look that seemed to say, "I know your secrets." I couldn't help but be drawn in. Before I knew it, we were talking. His voice was soft yet commanding, and every word he spoke stirred emotions I wasn't ready to confront. As the night deepened, our conversation turned to the nature of justice, love, and regret. The more he spoke, the more I felt a strange pull, as though we were two souls linked by the same burden of past mistakes. I tried to ignore the growing unease in my chest, the realization that this man, whose decisions once tore my family apart, now held my heart in his hands. Later that evening, as we left the bar together, the city lights blurred around us. In the secrecy of a quiet hotel room, we succumbed to an irresistible attraction that defied reason. In that passionate embrace, every forbidden touch was charged with danger. I was lost in the moment, intoxicated by a mixture of desire and the heavy weight of my hidden identity. I knew that by falling for Leonard, I was stepping onto a path lined with heartbreak and betrayal. Even now, as I write these words, I feel the tremor of that night echo in my soul. I am torn between the allure of Leonard's charm and the haunting legacy of my father's past. The secret of who I truly am, a daughter born from a man wronged by the very hands of justice, looms over every stolen kiss and whispered promise. And as the night gave way to a fragile dawn, I couldn't shake the fear that this affair might someday force the truth into the open, shattering our fragile bond forever. Little did I know then that the spark of our illicit encounter was only the beginning of a dangerous dance with destiny, one that would force both of us to confront the demons of our past. The days following that fateful night were a blur of stolen glances, secret meetings, and a growing inner conflict. As a law intern at one of the country's leading firms, my schedule was filled with endless case files and legal briefs. Yet, in between the mundane routines of legal research and court observations, I found my thoughts drifting back to Leonard. I would often catch myself smiling at the memory of his soft voice, his thoughtful eyes, and that magnetic charm that made every moment we shared feel like it was wrapped in secrecy. I remember the first time I saw him again after that initial encounter. It was in the grand foyer of the courthouse, where the marble floors echoed with the footsteps of those who sought justice. I was preparing for a lecture on legal ethics when I noticed him quietly observing the proceedings from a distance. His presence, both dignified and somber, stirred something deep within me. I couldn't help but wonder about the man behind those reflective eyes. How could someone who had once played a role in my family's darkest hour still evoke such a tender allure? Our conversations grew in intensity and frequency. During lunch breaks in a small, overlooked cafe near the courthouse, Leonard and I would talk about everything from landmark cases to our personal regrets. It was during one of these exchanges that I began to understand the dual nature of our connection. On one hand, his wisdom and calm demeanor offered me comfort, a safe harbor from the storm of legal challenges and moral dilemmas. On the other, the weight of his past, a past that included the case which had destroyed my father's life, loomed over every word he spoke. Every time his eyes met mine, I felt the echo of unspoken remorse, and with it, a guilt that I couldn't quite shake. In those moments, I felt caught between my duty as a budding legal professional and my overwhelming desire for something that felt both forbidden and inevitable. The allure of the illicit made every conversation feel dangerous, as though we were building a secret bridge between our worlds, a bridge that was destined to collapse under the strain of our hidden truths. I often questioned my own decisions. Was I being swayed by the magnetism of a retired judge whose legacy was intertwined with the very injustice that had scarred my childhood? Yet, every time we met, I found myself drawn into his world. Our meetings became a series of calculated risks: a stolen coffee in the early morning, a whispered conversation in the shadow of a courthouse column, and a fleeting touch of hands that sent shivers down my spine. Each encounter deepened my attraction and also deepened the layers of conflict within me. Sometimes, as I sat alone in my small apartment reviewing case files, I would remember his soft laughter and the way he confessed small details of his past, never fully revealing the burdens he carried. Those fragments of his story hinted at regrets that went far beyond the courtroom drama. They suggested that he, too, was tormented by the choices that had led to my father's downfall. Yet, every revelation only made me more uncertain about the path I was treading. I knew that with every secret meeting, every whispered word of passion, we were risking more than our reputations. We were risking our hearts and the fragile balance of justice and love. I often wondered if our forbidden attraction could ever stand the test of our intertwined fates. The passion was undeniable, but so was the shadow of my father's past, which grew heavier with each passing day. As I closed my eyes one evening, the memory of Leonard's eyes haunted me, a silent question that begged for an answer. Would our growing desire overcome the scars of old mistakes, or was it destined to lead us to a point of no return? The uncertainty lingered, leaving me teetering on the edge of a cliff, with my future, and my heart, dangling precariously in the balance. In the weeks that followed our secret meetings, an unsettling unease grew inside me. Every whispered word and stolen touch with Leonard carried a hidden weight, one that urged me to dig deeper into the past that we both tried to forget. I found myself poring over old case files and newspaper clippings late into the night, desperate to understand the full story of my father's trial. Each document I read was a painful reminder of the injustice that had shattered my family, and the more I learned, the clearer it became that nothing about that fateful case was as simple as it seemed. I began to connect the dots, uncovering discrepancies in the evidence and testimonies that had once sealed my father Stanley's fate. It was as though the layers of deceit had been meticulously built to obscure the truth. With every page turned, I felt a tightening in my chest, a mix of sorrow, anger, and betrayal. Here was the man I had come to know as the embodiment of justice, Leonard, who had presided over the very trial that condemned my father to a life of disgrace and confinement. The irony was not lost on me. I had been drawn to him with an intensity that defied logic, even as his past loomed like a dark cloud over every encounter. The more I uncovered, the more I questioned the foundation of our clandestine romance. Had Leonard's soft words and tender gestures been nothing more than a guise to hide a deeper regret? In the quiet moments after our meetings, I found myself haunted by memories of my father's desperate eyes as he pleaded for mercy, a plea that was callously ignored by the judge I now held in my arms. I wrestled with a growing inner conflict. Every time our lips met, a part of me screamed for justice, for the truth to be acknowledged. I could no longer ignore the gnawing suspicion that my personal desires were dangerously entwined with a past that demanded reckoning. One evening, as the rain tapped softly against the window of a secluded hotel room, the burden of my discoveries became too heavy to bear. Leonard and I sat in a silence punctuated only by the sound of our racing hearts. I knew that if I did not speak the truth soon, the secrets would continue to fester between us like an unhealed wound. With trembling hands, I reached out and met his gaze, knowing that the moment I was about to share would change everything. "Leonard," I began, my voice barely above a whisper, "there is something you need to know." I paused, swallowing the lump in my throat, and then continued, "I am not just a law intern who happened to fall for you. I am the daughter of Stanley, the man you wrongfully convicted." The room seemed to freeze. For a long, agonizing moment, Leonard's eyes widened, his face a mask of conflicting emotions. The gentle hum of the air conditioner filled the void as I waited for him to speak. I could see shock, regret, and something deeper, an anguish that resonated with every beat of my heart. The silence was overwhelming, filled with all the questions that now demanded answers. Finally, his voice broke the stillness, soft and trembling. "Cindy." He started, but could not bring himself to finish the sentence. His words hung in the air, laden with the promise of an explanation that could either bridge the chasm between us or shatter what little remained of our fragile connection. In that heart-stopping moment, everything shifted. The hidden truth, long buried under layers of desire and deception, had emerged with a force that threatened to consume us both. I sat there, tears threatening to spill, as I realized that our love, and the very essence of who we were, would never be the same again. The promise of answers now came at a cost, and as the silence enveloped us, I wondered if there was any turning back from the pain that was sure to follow. The revelation of my true identity had shattered the fragile bubble we'd built, and now every moment with Leonard felt heavy with unspoken words and regret. In the days that followed my confession, silence reigned between us, a silence so thick it almost choked the air I breathed. I could sense his internal torment each time our eyes met, as if he were drowning in the weight of his past mistakes. I knew that confronting him was inevitable, and I finally decided that our next meeting could no longer be postponed. I arrived at Leonard's modest home on a gloomy afternoon, the sky awash of dull grays that perfectly echoed my mood. I hesitated at the door, the echoes of our last conversation still ringing in my ears. Inside, the living room was dimly lit by the soft glow of a single lamp. I found him sitting in an overstuffed chair, his gaze fixed on a faded photograph resting on a side table, a reminder of a time when justice, in his eyes, was uncompromised. "Leonard, we need to talk," I said quietly, my voice steady despite the storm of emotions raging within me. He slowly turned, his eyes filled with a mixture of sorrow and something I couldn't quite name. "Cindy," he began, his tone heavy with regret, "I never imagined that you would be caught in the web of my past." His words trailed off, as if searching for the right ones to ease the pain. I stepped forward, the raw honesty of the moment leaving no space for pretenses. "You condemned my father, Leonard. I watched him break under the weight of injustice, and I've spent my life trying to piece together the fragments of that pain. How can you look at me now, after what you've done?" Leonard's face fell, and for a long moment, no words came from him. The silence between us was punctured only by the distant hum of a fan and the beating of our hearts. "Finally," he whispered, "I did what I thought was right. I believed I was upholding the law, even if it meant that I was blinded by my own convictions." His voice cracked as he continued, "I never intended to cause harm, and I never imagined that the daughter of the man I wronged would stand before me today." My anger bubbled beneath the surface, mixed with a deep sense of betrayal. "Intentions don't change the reality," I shot back. "You made a decision that tore apart a family, and now, you expect me to simply accept your remorse?" I paused, fighting back tears. "How do you live with that, Leonard? How do you live knowing that your choices have scarred the lives of those who believed in justice?" Leonard's eyes glistened with unshed tears as he struggled to find words. "I am haunted by every decision I made that night," he admitted, his voice barely audible. "Every day, I relive the moment I sentenced your father. I live with regret, and I wonder if I could ever atone for what I did." Before I could press further, a sharp knock at the door startled us both. Leonard's hand trembled as he reached for the brass knob, and I felt my heart skip a beat. The knock came again, urgent and insistent. Reluctantly, he opened the door to reveal Edna, a close friend and colleague from the firm, her face lined with concern and urgency. "Cindy, Leonard, I'm sorry to intrude," Edna said, her voice hushed as if carrying a terrible secret, "but I've come across something that might change everything." She held out a small envelope, her eyes darting between us. "This contains new evidence regarding the case that wrongfully convicted your father, Cindy. I couldn't keep it from you any longer." For a moment, time seemed to stand still. My anger and sorrow wavered, replaced by a mix of hope and dread. Could this new evidence finally offer a chance for justice for my father? Or would it drive an even deeper wedge between us? Leonard's face turned ashen as he reached out, almost instinctively, to take the envelope. But his hand hovered in mid-air, as if he feared what the contents might reveal about the decisions he had made long ago. Edna's presence, unexpected and fraught with tension, had injected a new element into our already shattered world. I felt a chill run down my spine as I realized that the consequences of our actions were far from over. In that charged moment, the confrontation we had begun was about to escalate into a new, unforeseen chapter, one that threatened to upend everything we thought we knew about justice, redemption, and love. Standing there in the doorway, the envelope trembling in Leonard's grasp, I couldn't help but wonder, was this the key to healing our fractured souls, or the final nail in the coffin of our forbidden bond? The answer, suspended in the uncertain air, left our future hanging by a fragile thread. Leonard's hands trembled as he finally took the envelope from Edna. The weight of it was heavier than paper. It held the power to either expose the truth or confirm the mistakes of the past. My heart pounded as he slowly tore it open, his fingers hesitant, as if afraid of what lay within. He pulled out the documents inside, his eyes scanning the pages with a mix of disbelief and horror. I leaned in, my breath catching in my throat as I read over his shoulder. The evidence was damning. A key witness, one whose testimony had sealed my father's fate, had been paid off. The real culprit had walked free, while my father had spent years behind bars for a crime he didn't commit. I clenched my fists, my emotions a violent storm inside me. "You sentenced an innocent man," I whispered, my voice barely holding back the rage and grief threatening to spill over. "You took my father's life away, Leonard. And now you know for certain." Leonard collapsed into his chair, his face pale, his eyes wet with unshed tears. I was blind," he muttered. "I trusted the system. I believed I was delivering justice." He looked up at me then, his gaze raw and exposed. "I failed you, Cindy. I failed your father." For the first time, I saw a broken man before me. Not the powerful judge, not the charismatic older lover, but a man drowning in the weight of his own decisions. Edna cleared her throat. "Cindy, with this evidence, you can reopen your father's case. We can fight for justice." I swallowed hard, my emotions warring inside me. "Yes," I said, my voice steady. "We will." Leonard exhaled sharply, nodding. "I want to help," he said, his voice shaking. "I owe it to your father, to you, to make this right." I searched his face, looking for sincerity, for something real. Despite everything, a part of me still cared for him. But love could not erase the truth. "Leonard," I said, my voice softer now, "there's no undoing what's been done. No matter how much regret you carry, the past can't be rewritten." His eyes dimmed with sadness, but he nodded in understanding. "I know," he murmured. "But maybe I can still help fix the future." And so, we began the fight, together yet apart. The case was reopened. The truth was exposed. My father's name was finally cleared, though the years stolen from him could never be returned. As for Leonard and me, we never found our way back to what we once were. The love we shared had been built on broken foundations, and in the light of the truth, it couldn't survive. But I walked away from it all stronger, knowing that justice had finally been served, not just for my father, but for me. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to our YouTube channel for more gripping stories. Your support helps us bring more exciting content your way. See you in the next one.